Welcome to ID 302, the Healthcare Design Studio, and this is the online summer 2019 version here at Endicott. Let's just go over some of the housekeeping first. This is the official course description. This is what's in the catalog, and this is what we owe you. This is the design and programming process is applied to projects of increasing complexity and scope with consideration given to institutional uses. In this case, the institution is healthcare. Students advance their design knowledge and implementation through advanced programming and user analysis incorporating universal design, environmental systems, and life safety codes. So, and there's a long list of learning outcomes from the syllabus, which will be posted on Canvas as soon as I get Canvas up and running. And obviously the main point of this studio, it's an advanced studio. In fact, it's the last one you'll do before starting the thesis project during your senior year. So, of course, you're going to want to have competent skills in three-dimensional and two-dimensional design, creating projects and models. Of course, now we're expecting a high degree of facility with understanding human factors associated with this particular project type. And of course, we typically do healthcare, well, for a couple of reasons. One, the human factors issues are quite complex. These are people which are sick, or in our case, at the end of life. And so they are limited in their ability to move. They often need help. They often need wheelchairs or mobile beds. All of these things create some fairly complicated situations in terms of design and universal design. As you probably remember, universal design is not required by law, but it is recommended by certain project types. And of course, we chose a project type that really needs it. Anyway, there are some other things related to building codes, and in this case, there will be some understanding of kind of the laws surrounding how this type of care is defined and paid for. So this is an online class, as you've probably figured out. There will be some background reading and some reflective writing that I'm going to have you start out with. But basically, this will be run as your typical studio. There'll be weekly homework. Assignments will be due Wednesday night. I just figured that's a good middle of the week night. You are welcome to submit early, or of course, if you have work considerations. Everybody has different schedules in the summer, so I totally understand. We can be flexible. There's only 5 of you. So, but just let me know if there is a different night that's better for you. And I will be making comments via Canvas. And our semester will basically have 3 parts: pre-design, schematic design, and design development, roughly dividing the semester into thirds. Our final assignment will be due Wednesday, August 7th. So there will be a number of sort of online special considerations. Obviously, you have to work independently. I won't be there to nag you every day and do desk crits. That's why the junior level second semester studio is actually not such a bad one to do online, because you have reached that point where hopefully you don't need too much help with sort of basic issues, but we can really discuss more advanced issues. That said, if you do need help with something, please let me know. I will be available by email and probably not on campus, but that's probably okay because probably most of you are not on campus. But please let me know if you're struggling with anything. But otherwise, I'm going to be having weekly assignments that I'll just kind of expect you to post unless I hear from you otherwise. So what's our summer healthcare project? It's going to be a hospice house. Now, if you haven't heard of them, they are a medical facility designed for the end of life. And first of all, as an overview, prior to the 20th century, people basically died at home. There were hospitals. First of all, hospitals weren't very common. And second of all, hospitals were not really a great place to go because medical care prior to the 20th century was a little rough, to say the least. There wasn't much they could do for you. And it was assumed that you would die at home and that this was totally normal. Your family would be around. And it was a very comfortable sort of thing. Now, in the 20th century, the advances in healthcare and the greater prevalence of hospitals meant that people tended to die away from home at hospitals. And of course, hospitals are very medically and very unpleasant places to be. They're designed as kind of, car repair studios for humans or car repair shops. So they're really not ideal for end-of-life care where there's very powerful issues going on, and often the medical issues are really secondary. There's usually at that stage in life, there's not much that we can do for you. And so the issues are more ending your life in a way which is natural and healthy and of a benefit and a positive experience for your family and for you, the person dying. One of the great early developers of this sort of modern hospice movement is Cicely Saunders. And Cicely Saunders, she's actually a dom. She was, I guess, knighted, or I'm not sure what the right term is, by the Queen of England. And she was horrified at the way that people were dying in hospitals and felt that it was really unhealthy, just not natural and not a social positive experience, but really just kind of like, oh, your car, the engine in your car has failed, so that's it. We'll just take you to the junkyard. Anyway, this is the Wikipedia page for Dom Cicely Saunders, and really a fascinating way that she developed the hospice in St. Christopher's in London and developed this kind of process where it's a very holistic process, where, of course, your pain and anxiety, which is very common at the end of life, those are treated, but also trying to make sure that the patient receives the spiritual care that they're hoping for, that they speak with their family and their family understands what is going on, that it's a conversation, the notion of healing or peaceful garden where people could walk and kind of meditate on their place in life, which is to say at the end of life. Anyway, fascinating person and really interesting read there if you want. The link is in the lecture. Now, of course, in the United States, we don't always do things the right way. And so here, unfortunately, or whatever, our end-of-life care is often defined by what Medicare will cover. Even if you're working on private insurance or no insurance, the type of benefit you're going to get is often determined by what's called the defined benefit, how Medicare says you are eligible for hospice care. And so most hospices in the U.S. are designed around the notion of you are defined as a hospice patient. There's a whole process where your doctor has to certify that you are ready for hospice. And of course, you or your healthcare proxies also need to agree to that. It's typically 6 months or less to live. Now, of course, nothing is quite so cut and dry. In medicine, everything is complicated. Nobody just follows the set process. So this 6 months is a complicated thing. Often what will happen is a palliative care doctor. This is a physician who's typically based in a hospital, and they will be helping you as your disease or condition deteriorates to the point that you're going to be facing the end of life. And often they are the ones who make the designation that it's time for hospice, and they will often consider a patient hospice appropriate. This is patients who are going to die, and of course we are all going to die, but these are ones who are in theory within 6 months of dying. but also have the mobility and the ability to control any of their physical or psychological conditions medically in such a manner that they are not completely dependent on the high-tech hospital equipment. So hospice generally occurs outside of the hospital. There are sometimes hospice beds in the hospital for those patients who are hospice appropriate, but who are too sick, too physically ill to be transported. Typically, though, these are standalone facilities. And you might say, well, can you show me a picture of one? And yes, I can. There is one right nearby in Danvers, which is really an outstanding facility. In fact, a former Endicott grad worked on the interiors while she was at Samasco and Verbiage in Beverly, and it's called Care Dimensions. Used to be called Hospice of the North Shore if you've been around in the area for a while. Very nice hospice house that we can take a look at. So this is, they have a Facebook page that we can look at, and they have some nice pictures. It's a very nicely designed facility. What they've done, as you look at these pictures, things to notice. It's a very homey feel to the building, but notice that everywhere you go in this building, there are facilities and details which support the notion that this is still a medical facility. These are patients who are very sick and typically need to be wheeled around on a gurney. Everything needs to be universally designed. And also there has to be a certain cultural sensitivity. Every culture in the United States, and often I think people think of the United States as a polyglot culture. We have many subcultures. There's even just within the religious world, there's Christian of different types of Christianity, Catholics versus Protestants versus Jewish versus Islamic versus atheistic versus agnostic. And of course, each person dies, they need to be accommodated in these facilities. So it's fascinating to see how the design is both very spiritual and comforting and meant to be home-like, but also is somewhat, I guess, neutral in that it's not overtly, I don't know, one culture or another. It's not overtly white or Christian. It's very, I think, sensitively designed. Now, even as you look at this space, one thing you'll notice, first of all, the corridors are very wide. There are typically bumpers along the edge of the corridor, very deep wall bases, and that's to prevent the gurneys from smashing into the walls. The furniture is very heavy and is not easily tipped over. The interior fit and finish is, again, as mentioned, very neutral in the color scheme, but often, in particular, the lighting is very kind of subtle and soothing. There are quiet places for individual meditation. This is a non-denominational chapel. Now, you might say, well, it looks awfully chapel-y to me, but different hospices treat this space in different ways. Obviously, hospices run by religious orders are going to be associated with that religious order. But I've even been to a hospice that was in an old convent in New Jersey. So obviously the building had been designed for the Catholic religion, but it was run by a Jewish hospital, a Jewish philanthropic organization. So it was really fascinating to look at their non-denominational chapel and see how they accommodated really all sorts of different religions, including Islam and Buddhist religions, in a space which was much more flexible and yet also very sensitively designed. So anyway, there are all sorts of opportunities, again, in these spaces to create kind of either group or individual moments where people want to reflect. And this is not just for the patient, this is for the family as well. One of the big tenets of the modern hospice movement is that you have to treat the family as well as the patient. And I think getting beyond this notion that, oh, it's just the patient, it's their problem, they're dying. Especially patients, we probably always think, oh, well, you're always old when you're dying. And this is totally not the case. The patients that you see in these facilities can be any age. There is even pediatric palliative care, care for dying children. So, and plenty of instances where adults, but not senior citizens, are in these facilities. So changing your mindset to realize that this is something which affects everyone, and the facility should reflect that. It's not a warehouse for old people. It is definitely a place for people who are alive, and should be supportive of that. Even in the individual rooms, what you'll notice is that they have made a really nice effort to make it feel homey. There's lots of seating for multiple people. They're expecting multiple families. Often the beds fold out or have kind of outriggers that allow additional people to get in the bed. So you can have a 4-foot wide bed which accommodates other family members getting in the bed with the patient. And this is a very common feature at the end of life. Again, cultural expectations, a lot of cultures feel like, well, that's fine. You know, if grandma is passing, the grandchildren should be able to get into the bed and give her a hug goodbye. So anyway, the hospice, the Kaplan House in Danvers has some very nice patios. Again, look at the size of the door. You might say, whoa, who needs such a wide door? Because this way you can wheel the bed out the door with caretakers on either side of the bed pushing it. What a wonderful experience. And of course, you have to have an interior design which can accommodate this need. This includes no bump at the thresholds and continuous floor surfaces that are nice and smooth so that you don't have a kind of giant bump that you have to lift over going in and out. So anyway, and here's a view from one of the patients. And this is the Care Dimensions website. The link is inside the lecture here, so you can call it up. And it's really a great resource for all sorts of information about this. Where do I start? What is hospice care? What is palliative care? Now, I'm going to have some readings for you to do that are more general in nature. This is a fairly complicated topic, of course, so there are a number of features that can't be covered in a kind of quick skim of the website. So where do we get going with this? How do we get started? Well, first of all, I have a couple of readings. The longest one is by an author named Atul Gawande. He's a surgeon who's got some really nice books on end-of-life care and a lot of other subjects as well. But he wrote an article for the New Yorker called Letting Go. It's a good overview of the subject and kind of issues at end of life without having to read an entire book, which I think might be a little much for the summer. I will have in further lectures and also in the kind of bibliography section of our syllabus some additional sources for those of you who really want to read up more on the subject. A lot of really good books are out there on death and dying and the Kubler-Ross book. So a lot of more in-depth reading for those of you who are interested. There is also a short article from the New York Times talking frankly at the end of life for the physician's perspective. And just for balance, there is a government document from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Know Your Choices, which kind of explains the difference between just medical care, palliative care, hospice care, how those are all defined. I'd also like you to take a look at the Care Dimensions hospice. They have a little video tour of the Kaplan House that we were just looking at the photos of, and also a virtual tour of, they have a new hospice house in Wellesley, which is very nice. And anyway, once you've read the readings and watched the videos, I'd like you to just do a reflective essay. This does not have to be super long. A couple of pages, 3 pages is probably fine for that sort of thing. It's meant to help you really come to terms with what you think about this. I think a lot of people basically haven't thought about end of life, unless they've had maybe some family experience with it. And just what do you personally feel the end of life experience should be like? And draw on whatever you have, experiences that you might have, relatives. What do you think about after reading these books, dying at home? What do you think about dying in the hospital or dying in a hospice? If you are religious or have a religious tradition in your family, you might want to look into what they believe at the end of life. I have found it very fascinating teaching this studio that some of the religious orders, their approach to how you treat people at the end of life often is very surprising. Some cultures, some religions believe that you should do everything. Life is completely precious. Do everything to preserve it, whatever heroic measures, including, CPR, crushing someone's chest bones just to get their heart beating, even if they're already brain dead. That some religions believe that that's fine, whereas other religions, the Catholic religion, for example, they believe that when it's time, it's time, and that you shouldn't force these matters. So for each of you, that might be a really interesting investigation for you, even if you're not all that religious, or if you're just wondering, I wonder what different religions believe about this. Also, we have a kind of crazy culture in the United States, and our media kind of drives a lot of that. And what do you think happens at the end of life? What does it even look like? Well, of course, most of the time our ideas are not informed by experience. They are informed by what we see on TV and in the movies, and that's often like completely ridiculous, not the way it occurs at all. And then there's other things like the bucket list and that sort of thing. How do you think those influence our approach? And, to me, I also would like to know, how do you think you can address multicultural clientele? Even beautiful downtown Beverly, there are many different races and ethnicities and religions that are represented. And how can you make a facility that is kind of neutral in that way? And to me, the thing that I think will help you and also help you, this is meant to help you form concepts at the start of your design. What do you think is a good death? Is it, surrounded by physicians in a hospital? Well, then you can modify the project to be more hospital based. But do you think it's better, like the example of the Care Dimensions hospice? Would it be better to have access to the outdoors and to natural light and have your family around? Or is it just like, well, we want 600 channels on cable TV so that people are distracted? Is it more of a religious setting? That's perfectly fine. Or should it really feel like home? Is home the best place for hospice care? Try to explore those, write them out. This is fine as a reflective essay format. Please not total stream of consciousness. That's a little hard to read. But by all means, I'd like this to be something where you're exploring your thoughts on these ideas. And I'll make a spot on Canvas when I get Canvas up and running for you to post it. And speaking of Canvas, this is how we will interact. There will be no synchronous meetings, which is to say we won't be having any video chats, mainly because it's just going to be I have had this experience in the past. I try to have synchronous meetings in the summer, but In the past we've had to do them at like 9 or 10 at night, and that I just don't I don't want to do that again this year. So that's how I will be making comments for you. So look for that on Canvas. Make sure you know how to view those. I will try, if when we get to the design section of the semester, I will make graphic annotations on your drawings. I will also have a few homework assignments on the conversations section of Canvas. If you haven't used it before, this is where you can post images, and I will be asking one that you post so that you can participate and do your homework, but also that you comment on the other students' work. There's only 5 people, so if you could, as we do each kind of stage of design, if you could give just a little bit of feedback to your peers, that would be one super helpful for them. And also, I think it would be helpful for you, especially as we do things like bubble diagrams, for you to see what other people are doing. There's many ways to do this. And I will be getting Canvas up and running soon. I'm trying to set it up as modules. Supposedly those are really good for online classes, and I never use them. I haven't used them in the past, but this is the new world here this summer, so I'll get it up and running as soon as possible. And the essay, I would like it due this coming Wednesday, and so that means you'll have to do some reading, you'll have to do some video watching, and then you'll have to do some personal exploration. So please let me know if that's going to be a problem for you. Also, if you would prefer, if your work schedule or whatever schedule is such that you'd rather get it done earlier, by all means, let me know, and I will try to make comments as quickly as possible after it's submitted so that you can work in your schedule. But good luck, and we will be seeing you on the conversations on Canvas soon.